Hey, everyone. In light of the new recent NAR settlement and all of the noise that's happening out there in the real estate space, I wanted to come together with two very special people that I trust, that I consider mentors, that are industry experts, very knowledgeable in this space, and have been following the NAR settlement for a very long time. They are highly qualified women that I actually respect and I get to consider friends and mentors. And we have been speaking about how we can show up and give certainty during these times. We understand that there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, but we want to give you hope, and we want to share with the agent community that we are going to rally together and we are going to break this down. And we are also going to give you the strategies and also the confidence for you to be prepared for what is about to take place due to this new recent lawsuit. I'd love to welcome my dear friend and business partner and colleague, Kendall Bonner, who is a experienced broker. She ran her own franchise for many years. She has been in the business for a while, over a decade, and is also an industry expert. Last year, Kendall did a keynote speech at Inman, and it was the most viewed Inman, I would say, speech and also article and video of 2023 on this very same topic on how we could prepare. In addition to that, she is a licensed attorney in the state of Florida, and someone that I have just been so blessed to call like I said, a friend, a mentor, but she's probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. She's also a self-proclaimed tech guru, or all the tech companies call her, because she just loves to geek out on this stuff. So her credentials and her experience speak for themselves. In addition, I also want to welcome my other dear friend and someone that has been a mentor to me for over a decade, Kathy Helbig-Strick. I've had the pleasure of just building such a beautiful relationship with Kathy, but the conversations that we have are not just, on, building a business. It's really diving into how the agents can level up in this profession. And this is the opportunity for us to really wrap our arms around our industry and level up. Kathy also is from the state of Missouri, home of where this lawsuit started. So she has been following this, and she knows the ins and outs. She's been preparing for this, and also will share some other industry breaking news. We definitely want to set the stage. So I'm going to turn it over to Kendall, who's going to kind of set the stage for us. Kathy, I don't know if you want to mute real quick. Yeah. Set the stage for us and kind of give us kind of like the legal jargon of what we're going to avoid doing today. So that way we make sure that we are not violating any rules, especially in light of this new lawsuit settlement. But Kendall, welcome. Thank you, ladies, also for taking the time and stepping up. Lawsuit and leadership. And can we add the word ladies? So ladies, welcome.
Yes, thank you so very much. It's like such an honor to be here. I know Kathy and I have been geeking out all day today, when we got moments in between to just really think deeply about this and prepare and make sure that we, deliver value today. So just to get started, I do want to remind everyone.
Oh, Kathy, can we mute you real quick? Get an echo.
I do want to remind everyone that, for today's purpose and for any kind of meeting like this, it's important that we understand and remember the following. Number one, we are all coming from different states, with different rules. We're coming from, different brokerages, different MLSs, different experiences. So some of us are NAR affiliated, some may not be. So with that being said, please have some grace for the conversations that we're going to have today, that there might be some small tweaks or adjustments depending upon what state you're in. For example, the dual agency is illegal in 8 of the 50 states. So when we talk about things like agency and representation, please, insert what's normal, natural language in your state and in your business world for whatever we're saying, right? Also want to encourage you guys to avoid mentioning or discussing specific compensation amounts in the comments or your statements, because as always, commissions are negotiable. Even as we share stories today, we're going to do our best to be mindful of not using specific numbers, because again, We want to avoid that. And then also want to remind everyone that the settlement that came out last week on Friday, that is a proposed settlement, right? So it still needs to be approved. But I will say my personal opinion is that the changes that are NAR is open to making, they'll make regardless of what happens. It just might get tweaked even further. So just to set the stage before Kathy hops in and shares her thoughts and opinions on this as well, I do want to say that there are three basically new impacts that came as a result of the NAR settlement. And I'm just going to be brief about them so we can get into the discussions around them, right? So, number one, the first thing is that the majority of NAR members, brokers, MLSs, and boards are now safe from prosecution. This was important because, a lot of we in the copycat cases that came recently, we were starting to see individual people named, small teams, brokerages, et cetera. Right. So now this should prevent that from happening,
Kendall,
especially as
real
it
quick,
relates to.
can I ask you, somebody asked, is this being recorded?
Yes, this is being
Okay.
recorded.
Okay, it is being
Yes.
recorded. Perfect.
Yes.
Sorry.
No problem. And so yes, and that relates to the cases where the plaintiff is the seller. The second thing is the commissions field will be removed from the MLS, and we will now have to negotiate compensation for buyer's agents off MLS, right? So we'll get into that, what that means, and how you'll get paid, and all of that shortly. And then the third major impact is that buyer brokerage agreements will be required before showing or touring a home. And all of these things will go into effect mid-July of this year. So I know for me, Kathy, I don't know about you, but my first reaction to this settlement was good. Finally, now we know what the direction is that we all need to go in and the timeline that we have to get here. I don't know, Kathy, how about you? What is your reaction?
I cheered loudly at that one because to me, I feel like gone are the days that the tail is wagging the dog when it comes to buyer representation. And I think some of the biggest struggle as agents that we have in areas that have embraced buyer representation is that although it was recommended and agency was always required to explain, but the buyer agency or the contract or the employment agreement was where agents were very weak at getting those commitments up front. So agents have spent days, weeks, months, years, oftentimes working with people that they never get paid on. And so to me, the biggest silver lining out of all of this is that those days are behind us with this change. I'm excited about that.
I echo that. I mean, I think us, over the years, we have seen a lot more driveway consultations. We got away from the buyer consultations, especially with some of the online lead gen portals. So we're going to see a lot of changes that I consider necessary to give the buyer's agents the power back, and also, for our profession to be taken a little bit more serious and a little bit more commitment. So I echo the fact that after the shock and, kind of like not really understanding all the details, but then leaning into it, I saw the good that comes out of this, and there'll be so much more good that will come out of this. So thanks for highlighting that, Kathy. Kendall, how did we get here?
Oh, I was going to say, go ahead. We'll circle back to mine.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kathy.
No, I was going to say what we were saying before we went on air. To me, the biggest thing that the agents need to understand and the consumer needs to understand is the buyer agency relationship or the buyer agent buyer relationship should be no different than the listing agent seller relationship. And we have treated it different over the years. So if you think about it, you would be crazy as a listing agent to go to someone's house, pay for a bunch of professional photography, get some drones done, spend 2 or 3 months shopping it to all your agent friends and like doing all this work and never have a signed listing agreement. But that's exactly what we do every single day with buyers. So as agents, we just have to change our own mindset that we have to be able to articulate what our value is as a buyer agent representing buyers, but we don't have to back down now because the agent down the street isn't going to require it. See, that's always been when I'm training people how to do buyer consultations, and get buyer agency signed, the first pushback is, oh, what do I do? My buyer says they won't sign it because they just talked to another agent and that agent's not going to make them sign it. So that kind of helped us hostage a little bit because everybody wasn't playing by the same rules. So I think this is an amazing step in the right direction. And if we just realize and consumers realize, it's not a bad thing for you to pick an agent. So go interview your agents as a buyer agent and choose them just like you would with a listing agent, instead of calling someone randomly off the sign or getting someone randomly off a portal and then having them run around and work. And then maybe you end up, consummating something with them, or maybe you don't. So I think everybody's mindset has to change, including the consumer, that it's not a bad thing to commit to an agent.
So powerful. We're getting tons of comments, Kathy, thanking you for that comparison. And this is why we came together. We were, just texting back and forth, and like, people need to hear from you guys, and we need to give people the light, be the beacon for them to understand that this is a good thing. When we look at the bigger picture, this is a good thing, because now we will have a standard for all of us to follow on how we at least represent buyers, and gone are the days of just showing houses without any level of commitment. Okay, Kendall, so you've got some very important, topics that we're going to break down, from changes to the messaging of the buyer agency, representation agreement, open houses. What's going to change with open houses? The messaging to sellers, which actually I'm putting out a message to our sellers today to lean in and be the news for them. Let's start off with, what are the changes that you anticipate with the buyer broker agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you first started, one of the questions you also asked was like, how did we get here? Right. And I do want to address that briefly in saying that, there's a couple of reasons why we're here today. And one of the bigger ones is the fact that you could have an agent who's brand new in the business, never sold a home ever before, get paid the same as an agent who's sold, let's say, 100 homes in the last 2 years, which we all would recommend as an extreme top producer, right? And so these changes will allow us to have some control and take back some power and some agency for ourselves, and control over how much we're compensated. And that will now be reflected through the use of a buyer brokerage or buyer representation agreement, right? So for some people, that's going to not only determine agency, but and the relationship that you have legally to that customer, but also it's going to determine what you will be entitled to upon success, right? Of having them actually, um, purchase a home working with you. Now, I suspect that one of the things that will now be, immediately worked on, is a rewriting of all the contracts, right? I think they're going to rewrite purchase and sell agreements. They're going to need to rewrite listing agreements. And certainly they're going to need to rewrite buyer brokerage agreements or buyer representation agreements to reflect this change. And to Kathy's point, as she stated earlier, it is going to be about treating your buyers the way you would treat a listing. Especially, like she said, you would not list a home without a listing agreement. So now we'll be required not to show a home without a buyer agreement, right? And so these buyer agreements, they're going to come in the probably multiple formats. Right now it already exists. You have two different types of agreements, being exclusive versus non-exclusive. And I think that will continue, meaning a non-exclusive agreement will say something to the effect of, you can work with me and you may be working with someone else at the same time. I only get paid not for sending you properties, over the internet, but when I show you and actually help you execute an offer and go under contract on a property, that's when I'm entitled to be paid. And so I think a couple of good things are going to come out of this. I think we'll see, you know, one of the changes will be probably and hopefully less procuring claims,
I was
right?
about to ask. Where does procuring cause fall into all of this? For those of you who have been thinking about that or have never been up against a procuring cause, issue.
Yeah, where hopefully this will minimize procuring clause claims. Again, one of the things that we'll need, I happen to be a vice chair for the Broker Advisory Council for Stellar MLS, which is the third largest MLS in the country. And we recently on our call had a vendor come in and show us basically what's called a buyer, broker or buyer representation repository, which is what we'll need, right? Like some sort of place where hopefully the MLS can leverage a third party or do this on their own, where brokerage agreements gets uploaded and stored. So that way it's searchable, perhaps like, hey, I'm not going to be able to work with Veronica because Kathy's already under an exclusive agreement with Veronica. And that if Veronica wanted to change agents, she would have to terminate, or somehow cancel or come to the conclusion of her agreement with Kathy before she could come and work with me. Right. So I think things like that are still going to be needed. I think we'll start to see some of those things implemented to help make it easier to facilitate and know. Just like how currently in our MLSs, we upload documentation so we know which homes are under listing agreements. Right. So it'll be important to have something on the buy side as well. I think working with buyers without an agreement was always a problem and always a challenge, like Kathy said. And now having these agreements, I think will actually provide better protections, not only for agents, but also for consumers. Because I recommend in your buyer agreements, especially when they have additional terms, labeling out and putting in writing what you're going to be doing for them, right? So that it's a reminder to that customer all the work and all the things that you'll be doing on their behalf to help them have that successful transaction and experience.
And I
So
think
good.
it's important, Kendall and Veronica, too, because somebody had asked, can we work with a buyer without a broker arrangement if we're not showing a house yet? And I think it kind of dawned on me today when I was driving early this morning after really listening to a bunch of different leaders in this industry talk about their interpretations of things. And Miranda rights kind of came to my mind. And I thought, we almost have to read people their rights if they haven't signed an agreement with us. Now, it's going to be required. We can't show them houses without agreement. But that little phase between when you start showing someone a house and when they sign an agreement, or perhaps an open house visitor, I think we're going to see disclosures put at the entry of the open house that we represent the seller. And basically, it's kind of like, you got to read them the rights. Hey, anything that you say can and will be used against you in negotiations unless I am representing you. So I think, again, consumers need to realize, yes, they can go shop around open houses. And yes, agents can hold open houses. And maybe you can talk to a buyer before you get an agreement. But up until the time that that agreement is in place, you don't represent them.
Yeah.
So that's a dangerous place to be as a consumer. So it's in their best interest to commit to an agent. Just go and interview some and then commit.
Kendall, I hear a lot of noise about this is going to give listing agents a lot more power. What is your opinion on that?
I think that it's definitely I think there's a lot of wins on both sides with this. Number one, and we haven't gotten into, how buyers, agents will be paid, but this will give listing agents some flexibility with listings, right? Whether the listing agent decides to collect commission for both sides and still continue to pay a co-broke, because that can happen. So let me say that there are 4 ways now that a buyer agent can be paid. They can be paid by the seller directly. They can be paid by the buyer directly. They can be paid through a seller concession that will now be allowed in the MLS, right? Or they can be paid by the listing broker. Okay. So, empowered listing brokers will take this opportunity to have different types of conversations and negotiations with the sellers and determine what's in the best interest of that listing agent and that seller, right? And be able to determine, different marketing strategies. Because for me, if I were a listing agent, and how I'm going to consult my team is, I want to say to a seller, listen, I'll take all that off your plate. Because right now, how it's going to be set up going forward is we're going to go through another round of commission negotiations at
Right.
offer. How about you pay me X, and whether there is a co-broker or not, that's all you pay. Because one way or another, an agent's going to be on the other side, whether it's someone else on my team or another agent from another brokerage. So pay me X and I will continue to pay the other agent and I'll negotiate with them directly. So you don't have to worry about it. And this is done for you.
Let's
That's
go a little
one
deeper on that. Like, I love that. And you're going to break them all down. But when you say that, right? If we pre-negotiate the commission and, the seller has the choice, right? Again, the seller has the choice to decide, and we're going to educate them. Is the seller putting themselves in a position where we don't know what the buyer agent negotiated on their end? And if they're overpaying or under, cutting themselves a little short because of their value, where does that excess go? Where will that excess commission that was pre-negotiated go to?
Great question. The buyer's agent is capped to the amount that they agreed to accept from the buyer, whatever they put into the buyer brokerage agreement, right? So you're capped at that number. So and if let's say the seller or listing broker is offering more than what you discussed with or what you have in writing with the buyer, you cannot collect more than that. So you're capped at that. You can collect less. You cannot collect more than what you have in writing in your agreement. So, so that's what I would say to that. So there technically is no excess anymore.
Correct. And I'm glad
It'll
you
be
emphasized that, because I wanted people that perhaps if their broker hasn't informed them or they haven't read up on it or they weren't clear, that we clarify that for them.
Yes,
Your
exactly.
employment agreement is your buyer agency agreement with your client, and you're not entitled to more than that. And a lot of
Correct.
people leave that blank or would, not have any of that filled in. So
Gone are the days. Gone are the days. Yeah.
days
Kendall, what's
and
the second way?
well, real
Yeah.
quick,
So
too, are you
Kathy.
saying that your services are free? So if it's on or doesn't cost you anything to work with me as a buyer agent, if any of that is in your social media, your website, your listing presentations, your buyer presentations, that better be out by tonight. Like that's got to
that
go.
should have been gone. Offering your services for free should have been not out of our language long time ago, actually. Yeah, I agree with that.
So Kendall, I know we have a lot to cover, but there is someone who said in the comments, like, can we just go a little bit more deeper there? Like just for those who perhaps don't have someone to educate them or haven't quite gotten with their brokerage yet, or still they have questions. They want to go a little deeper on how the agent will get compensated. They have the buyer broker agreement, the agency agreement. Their fee is 3. And again, we're not going to throw out percentages. Whatever the negotiated buyer representation agreement is, that is locked in, right? When you go to submit an offer, if the seller agreed to pay a certain amount and that is more than what you pre-negotiated or what your standard fee is that you charge buyers to represent them, that excess does not go to you. If it is less, if you pre-negotiated less, that excess does not go to you. If the seller's paying more, a bonus. So that's where I think I want you to dive a little deeper to give them clarity on what this really means.
Yeah. So if there's bonus, I don't know yet. But so one of the things that I'm saying to people is the real estate industry is like a quilt right now. And we started to pull the string from the quilt. And what happens when you pull the string? It just keeps coming, right? And if you pull too much too long without snipping it and tying it off, what happens? The whole thing unravels, right? And so what happens now is we're going to be pulling strings, figuring out, and then we're going to identify problems, and then we'll have to snip them off and tie them up and create solutions. So for example, when bonuses are offered as a part of an incentive, we'll have to see what comes out of the rules, what we can do with that, if we'll be able to accept those, or if it's as simple as rewriting or creating some sort of addendum or renegotiating the compensation with the buyer and that will allow us to accept it. I'm not sure yet how that ultimately is going to settle out, but it's a fair question. We just don't know yet. Removing the MLS or commission field from the MLS is going to create some uncertainties, but it doesn't mean that we still, that sellers will still not pay, or that agents will not be able to collect payment for their services, right? That's the reason why the BBA is now required. So back to listings and the power of the listing agent and what their options are. So a listing agent can say, pay this X dollar and I will pay myself and a co-broke. That is one thing a listing agent can do. The second thing a listing agent can say to a seller is that, listen, commissions are no longer allowed to be listed into the MLS. So what that means for you now is when an offer is submitted, the buyer's agent may request compensation. They may not. I won't know until we get the offer. And at that time, you and I will have to have a discussion about the offer, meaning what's the contract price? What are the terms, including the commissions being requested? And then we will negotiate that at that time. And so now you have, but now the buyer's involved, the seller's involved, and everyone, there's transparency now between all parties, who's getting paid what and by whom and for what. And so that is something that, if you think about it, we were lacking in our previous system. And, so it's not a bad thing that transparency is being made a priority going forward, because I think it's that lack of transparency in the past that has created the scenario where so many people don't understand what we do, perhaps may not even value what we do because they don't understand it. And so now we are going to be forced to articulate it and forced to do it. And that's not a bad thing, in my opinion. It'll raise the bar of professionalism in our industry, which is something that I think is also significant and needed as well.
And just to give you an example, like here's some sample language that some of our leadership has talked about, potentially something like this. And according to what your brokers, of course, are going to set your own language, but something like seller to credit buyer X at closing of escrow to satisfy buyer's contractual agreement with buyer brokers. So those would be the type of language that would be writing into our offers. Somebody asked, how do we know what we're getting paid? I mean, at this point, I think we're going to be calling the agent to find out what is being offered at this point. I think somebody else asked, Lynn, you asked a question. I forgot what it was.
Well, so can I add this, Kathy? Because I think this will kind of sum up some of those questions. Number one, agents, you are going to have to get a number and decide what your value is upfront in writing. So number one, that's what you're getting paid, right? Let's start there. That's what you're getting paid, is the number that you put into your agreement. So that's number one. Number two, to determine who's paying it, now it's decide. You need to call the listing, call the listing agent, call ahead, find out, are they offering compensation? Is the seller willing to offer anything in compensation? You'll be able to determine from the MLS itself if there's any concessions that can cover your compensation. And then you'll be able to ask the buyer at that point, say, hey, buyer, this is my compensation. You've agreed to it. Now I need to find out from you, are you willing to look at homes where compensation is not offered to be paid by a third party? My goal is to have it paid by a third party in some other way as best I can, if that's what you want. But I just need to know if you want to see those properties or not, right? At the end of the day. And then if the seller is only offering a portion, or the co-broke is only offering a portion of what you're entitled to, now you have to decide if you want to collect the difference from your client as they agreed, or waive it, right? I mean, we've always had the power to give rebates. And so that will not change. And so the other thing that I think is going to be a major change that we all will have to adjust to is you are going to have to start writing into your purchase and sale agreements and offers the amount of compensation you are going to be paid as a buyer's agent and who is paying it. So that'll be in your additional terms, unless they rewrite the contracts to include check boxes and fill in the blanks, which I suspect it will probably come. But between now and then, you will have to write it into the contract.
So let me circle back to the end of Dylan's question, because this has been a lot of agents' questions. She says, can we say buyer agent being paid per MLS. No, because nowhere in the MLS anymore are you allowed to have any type of offer of compensation. So in zero field, you can't hide it in the directions. You can't hide it in the, the special agreements, any of that kind of stuff in the MLS. Now, you can, like Kendall said, you can negotiate based on whatever you want to put in your contract that you're getting covered on your buyer agency agreement, because that ultimately is where it states. And you can have the seller offer concessions. So if the seller wants to say, I'm willing to pay 3% seller concessions for the buyer, it's not the buyer's agent. That's the
Right.
difference. It's seller
So I have a-
concession to the
I have a
buyer.
question. Like, ladies, I've heard a lot of things thrown out. Like, there's this whole wish, they're hoping that, something in the realtor remarks could be like, hey, submit your offer and your, buyer agency, requested commission with your offer. Like, just submit it. That's been thrown out. Like, is that something that we anticipate? That's what we're hoping, that it doesn't say what, but just if you would like compensation, just submit it, and again, everything is negotiable. Then there's also the discussion of like, what is okay on the MLS, but like on the sign, can there be a sign writer that says compensation welcome, buyer agency compensation welcome, submit with your offer, like and again, this is all new. I am not an attorney. I do not know what is going to be allowed. I am still navigating through this with you all. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out to you guys and kind of see what your thoughts are on all that.
Well, I see savvy listing agents promoting this as incentives off MLS. Again, I don't know about you, but I send out emails every time I have a new listing to as many realtors as I can. I have a whole database. I have thousands of realtors in my marketplace that I send an email every time I get a listing. So if I know we're offering compensation, I'm going to highlight that in that email. That is completely acceptable in the scenario, because why? It's off MLS. I think we will probably see sign writers on yard signs. Again, that is off MLS. I believe that we'll see agents picking up the phone when they're doing their reverse prospecting, letting agents know there's compensation and incentive being offered. So I think that we'll
The open
find
house,
ways to
open
communicate.
house signs that'll have it. There'll be ways for us to be able to do so. We obviously are all at the same brokerage, and we obviously have a large agent population. And I think that there's a disclaimer on what is allowed on the brokerage website. Can you dive a little deeper on that, Kendall or Kathy, whichever one is perhaps familiar?
Go ahead, Kendall.
I can answer that. So basically, what's going to happen now, what's most likely is going to happen now, and I've been told this by general counsel for one of the MLSs, that because we have IDX feeds and IDX agreements and things like that, we will not be able to list out compensation, I believe, on other listings that are not ours. I believe we might be able to do it on our own, but I don't know that for sure. I would say but the reality is most likely we will not be able to see this displayed on IDX feed, and like website portals, right? So I thought maybe originally I thought, well, maybe the portals will be able to get away with it, like the Zillows or Realtor.com, the Realty.com, the Homes.com, et cetera. But it was my understanding from the conversation I heard from someone else who was in the know that they will not be able to list compensation and have a disadvantage or have an advantage over the MLS from that perspective. So.
On that same vein, do you anticipate, and we were talking earlier this week with Leo, and we heard some conversation regarding agents opting to leave NAR, right? And the MLS. And then, for example, at our company, we have a sister division under the commercial division where you can be under the commercial umbrella and fall under those where they're not actually regulated under NAR. And then that would not fall into the rules. Is that correct? And then that website that you have that promotes your listing would not fall under the MLS rules. Is that correct?
Wait, I missed the first part of that. I'm sorry. What was the first part?
If
Unless
someone
Kathy
comes out of NAR, then we don't have to follow the NAR directives. And that.
Oh, Yes, I mean, I think there's it depends, right? Because with for example, um, NAR, or I should say, many of our MLSs have an exception to the NAR rule, right? It's called the three-way agreement and more, right? Which is why when we join a local board, it automatically connects you to the state board, which connects you to NAR, which then also gives you the right to become an MLS member, right? Like you can't, for our MLSs, because some of our MLSs, most of our MLSs are owned by um, uh board of realtors, right, connected to NAR. But there are some private ones out there, right? And there's some that are not affiliated with NAR. Those are the minority, but there are those. But anyway, when it relates to the NAR owned, or I should say realtor owned MLSs, you can become what's called a Thompson broker, right? And
Yes,
that's a
that's
legal
a
case.
Thompson agency.
And right. That allows that a broker and its agents to have access to the MLS without being members of NAR, right? And across the country, it may not be called Thompson Broker. And I think it's in some states it's called Thompson Broker, in other states it has its own name. But when you are a Thompson Broker, you have access to the MLS, you are still bound by the rules of the MLS, right? So, a lot of MLSs have adopted NAR rules as their own, right? They've codified them, just like a lot of state statutes have codified, portions of the code of ethics and or other rules, right? So you have those rules guiding you in more than one way, right? So I would say if they're a Thompson broker or somehow affiliated member of that MLS, they're still going to be bound by those rules. If you completely disassociate yourself from NAR and the MLS, you can, I guess, arguably go your own path. But again, that's a non-issue because you're off MLS, right? Like, and you're
And we're not
completely allowed.
encouraging, yeah, and I want to, for the record, we're not encouraging that. We are just, again, having an honest debate or a conversation, guys, just to understand what some of the comments are and what we're thinking.
And I
Not
also say I'm sorry, just
because
this last point. I just want to say when you also leave NAR, you also leave the blanket of protection of NAR too, right? So, I know a lot of people think we should leave NAR for various reasons. And, I'm not here to debate that, but I just say, there's pros and cons to both.
And I was
Yeah.
just gonna say, one of the things that I think people don't think about is that the board forms that everybody is used to having and using would then be a cost for you to go do. So you kind of got to weigh out, oh, are you saving a few $100s and not be part of NAR, but then you're going to have to go recreate all the forms and have legal counsel, endorse those forms. And then a few people I know in the chats I want to circle back to some of that, talking about the concessions and FHA, VA, all of that, those buyers are going to be screwed and all that type of thing. So it appears that there is issues with concessions and some of those government sponsored loans. But I've also been told by many sources that there are talks going on within the industry to potentially either reinterpret some of those rules or potentially make some changes to some of those rules. So hold tight on that. Let's not say the house is on fire for VA buyers, FHA, USDA, that type of thing. I think we're going to figure out how to still, we have to figure out how to still make that work for our veterans and our and our government loan consumers. So let's just pause on that. But definitely, someone I was listening to today said that they believe that the current writing of the VA rules can be interpreted that a buyer agent could be paid. So,
Well, so remember, it's not about whether a buyer's agent can be paid or not. And let me remind you guys, that's not the point. We've always been paid on VA loans, right? It's who pays us. And
Right.
so the question becomes, can the buyer pay us on a VA loan or not? Well,
correct.
the only way around this is to have the way the rule currently sits right now is in the closing statement. Commissions for the buyer's agent has to be on the seller side. Right now, that is how we'll get paid. Either the seller or the listing agent has to pay us when working with buyers or with VA and buyers, right? And that would, And so in terms of it affecting FHA and VA and, we already have a problem with affordability, like, right? We all know that. And that's going to continue to be a challenge. That has always been a challenge with homeownership. It's always been for the people who could afford it. All right. We've always said that. That's not any different today as it was yesterday, and nor will it be tomorrow. The challenge will be when, and it really just comes down to a choice. You will say to your buyers, you have two choices through this entire transaction when working with me. Number one, you will have the choice on whether to see homes that are not offering an incentive to you to work with me, as well as the choice to work with those sellers, knowing those sellers are not willing to offer that incentive to you. I believe that paying a buyer agent commission is not only an incentive to the buyer's agent, but to the buyer themselves, because that allows a protection for the buyer that the buyers need. And let's go back 30 years when, we didn't have traditional buyer representation. Why do we have it today? It's because consumer protection agencies were adamant about the fact that buyers were buying homes without assistance and without certain knowledge. And so we brought in buyers agents to help protect them, meaning they were buying sinkhole homes and not knowing it, right? They were buying homes with roofs that need to be replaced and they didn't know it, right? Because there was no one on their side working for their benefit. And so that's why this is still going to continue to be an important incentive that sellers will want to pay, because it will protect them from litigation at the end of the day. So the buyer having their own representation helps protect that seller from getting sued later. So these are the things that we need to be thinking about. Again, it's about messaging. How are you messaging your value and what you are offering in terms of protection and leadership and strength and knowledge and expertise and, all those various things for that buyer, which at the end of the day also helps for a better, smoother transaction for the seller as well. So I don't think sellers are going to stop paying when they might experiment. They might try.
Oh yeah, they're going to try that. But it's up to
I
us
think
to educate them.
they'll be unhappy with the result.
Yeah. Listen, for sale by owners have been around for a long time, right? And we've dealt with this on the other side. And as a strong listing team, I think that the messaging is really important, like you said, Kendall, and it's proper education. I mentioned earlier to you guys, I'm, sending a message to all of our sellers today in light of the recent news, because we're getting some questions and, giving them the certainty that, buyer compensation is optional and it's always been optional. And, I think that we're going to see sellers and the sellers we have already talked to, they're like, oh no, we want to compensate. We want buyers to come to our home. We want to compensate. We agreed to it early on and we want to do it again. We want to continue doing it. Kendall, you had some points that you really wanted to touch base in. I know that we're almost, we're about 20 minutes in till the top of the hour. So I want to honor that. Open houses. We talked about that briefly. We want to talk a little bit about open houses. We haven't gotten to that yet, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
I touched on it earlier, but if you've got more to throw in there, in your opinion, I'm just thinking that we're going to have some disclosure before people come in and not, just automatically assume an agency representation and employment agreement from somebody that's standing with us at the open house. If they want to leave and talk about hiring us as a limited agent, dual agent, or buyer's agent, then we establish our fee up front, right then and there. Then we go into negotiating the offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember too, everyone, that your agreements can be 1 day, 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, right? Like the length of time of your agreement, it's again, it's negotiable. And we're going to have to learn, you know what? And don't be mad at me, audience. I'm going to say something, you're all going to be offended. We have to not behave one way because that's how everybody else behaves. We do what the pack does. And now is a chance where we are going to have to, I always say, be a shark, not a sheep, not in the aggressive way. I just mean, be okay being alone. Like it's okay to use your brain, right? Like think outside the box sometimes. And again, not in an oppressive way, not in a bad way. I'm not insinuating anyone should do anything that's bad for the industry. But in other words, you're going to meet buyers and sellers like me. I'm an attorney. I'm sophisticated. I've sold houses before. I've been an investor. I've been a buyer. I've been a seller. I don't need Kathy or Veronica as a listing agent. They bring way too much value. I'm never going to appreciate them at the level that they would bring. I'm not going to agree to pay what they're worth because in my mind, I don't need it. However, my cousin who's a first-time home buyer who's never sold a home before or bought a home, or maybe my grandmother who's 91 years old and needs to sell her home, right? And she's sold homes before, but guess what? She hasn't sold a home in 30 years. Or my mother-in-law, same thing. They're going to probably want someone like a Kathy, like a Veronica, and they'll be willing to pay for it because it makes sense for them. So now we get to be flexible. We get to say, hey, you only need me to open a few doors for you, maybe fill out a contract for you. I'm going to charge you X for that because that doesn't take a lot of my time. And I have no problem doing that for you. And then over here, I have this other client. I know that you need this X, Y, and Z from me. And that's going to cost us X because this is the amount of time I anticipate it's going to take. And I want to be able to give you the highest level of service. So I think that's really important. And with the time we have, I want Kathy, you, Veronica, and myself to talk about value proposition. Everyone keeps talking about share your value. What's, explain your value to the buyer. Like, what does that mean? I'm so frustrated because we leave it at that
Chomping at
without
the bit part.
people to share with them. So
Good.
Kathy,
I think
how
it's
about you?
important too because we're so caught up on the buyer side right now, and the value proposition is for both sides. So even think about as listing agents, I'm seeing these headlines come out. They're crazy, ridiculous headlines of buyer or seller commissions are being slashed. Gone are the days of paying listing agent. All these crazy clickbait headlines, and in my mind, I'm thinking, it's not an automatic reduction of commissions for a listing agent, because if we get to a point, think about it this way, if we get to a point where there's consumers that are refusing to commit to somebody, and so they're just going to go to the listing agent, now we're kind of becoming listing agent accompanied listing agents, right? So that changes our time investment involved. So if we're starting to have to put more time in, a property takes longer, I have to show up at every single showing because I can't count on my 12,000 people sales force in our area that's going to help sell your house, and now the burden is on me, then maybe that's going to reflect in my price. So we have to think about that as listing agents too, to not just race to the bottom and go, oh, it's in half because I don't have to share it anymore. That's wrong. So we've got to come together as creatives and strategists to come up with all of the reasons why we're worth what we're worth. And that's where the money is, you guys. You have to know your own value proposition. And if you are not creative, get with some other people and do a powwow and take some juice off of each other and make it your own. But you've got to be able to go out there and nail a listing appointment and get what you're worth, and also be able to talk about how these commissions may or may not affect the value or the amount of people that are interested. And then, of course, on the flip side, for the buyer side, you've got to be able to sit down and have a buyer consultation that is just like a listing appointment, and then ask for the commitment. But how are you going to get people to commit if you can't show them and articulate why they should commit to you? So
Absolutely.
there's statistics, there's the facts of what's going on. You're going to see attorneys pop up. You guys, I've already seen a couple things out there. Attorneys are going to flood into this and say, I can write a contract for you, don't have to pay an agent. Like, we're going to see that type of thing. But I can tell you, they don't know how to navigate the emotions. They don't know how to navigate finding the vendor people, the carpet cleaners, all the people that you're going to need. And that is a different type of service. But you need to think about all that, write it down, get it into print, and be able to present that with conviction and confidence. That's the key.
Kathy, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And as a team that it focuses a lot on listings, we would get an influx of calls of buyers who would come, and think that because we were the listing agent and they weren't represented, that they would get that we would reduce our commission. And that was a fallacy. We know our value proposition as a team. We would either recommend them to either bring a buyer's agent or connect them with one on our team. And we took that stance and we still stand by that, because it doesn't mean that just because you're the listing agent, you're gonna take this reduced commission when now you're representing both parties. The risk that's associated with that, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of emotions, and who do you have your fiduciary relationship with? The other thing I think, which is really interesting, is, Kathy, you nailed it. A lot of times our value proposition is not just upfront, it's post closing, it's post the relationship. It's also the resources and the arsenal of I would say your Rolodex, right? Who the relationships, everything from, I mean, if you're buying a wetland, if there's encroachments, if there's appraisal issues, the knowledge that it takes, like, you are tapping into our expertise. And yes, we will need to break that down. And I will say we are working on buyeragencyplaybook.com so that we can give to the industry sample of value proposition. And I'm telling you guys, for the first time live here, it is coming. I have been doing a lot of research, gathering, and I'm excited to partner with also you ladies, because I'm going to need your amazing value to give agents who perhaps do not have a well-packaged value proposition, or they're relying on their broker. We are going to give you the gift of being able to know, what are those items that I should include in my buyer consultation? What are those things? Okay, I'm going to break down my relationships with my appraisers, my experience with banks, my knowledge with the different type of loan programs that are out there, my relationship with other listing agents in my market. There's so many things that you can do to articulate your value proposition. And one of the things that's so important, regardless of what you guys do, is, number one, the confidence that it's going to take. And it's the same confidence that you would go into a listing presentation. And this is where I get on my soapbox. Okay. Buyers will pay for expertise, and they will pay for your confidence and your competence. And it is the time now to get extremely crystal clear. And what Kathy says, if you are not yet a strong listing agent, now is the time to partner. Now is the time to perhaps see who in your market is dominating. Where can you link arms with them? Gone are the days of thinking, well, this is mine. This is why I'm pro team. If for some reason right now you're not prepped for this, this is where you may say, okay, listen, maybe I need to join a strong team, right? That can help articulate this for me, that has a true marketing message, that has, the infrastructure. The other thing I would say is, how are you going to stand out? I said this the other day. I'm about to do a presentation this week on standing out from the people pile, right? Do you have your community videos that when an agent is looking for in that particular neighborhood, you can drop them your library of your knowledge of the neighborhood, your relationships with the HOA, your experience of the amount of homes that you've sold in there. So many different things that you can do. Things such as, you already have a library of the HOA docs. I want you guys to think outside of the box. And like Kendall said, don't be a sheep. And if you're with the brokerage that said, we solved this problem for you, every single person is going to have a cookie cutter, I'm here to tell you, that's not what I want, because I want to stand out from the people pile. And believe me, we are working on it. But the collaboration aspect of this is going to be so powerful. If I know that I'm still perhaps not certain as to how to articulate my value proposition as a buyer's agent, I'm linking arms with a strong buyer's agent in my market, or a strong listing agent in my market. The same as I would do in a listing for a luxury buyer, the same I would do if I'm in a divorce situation and the spouse has another agent that they want to use, and the wife wants to use me, and I say, hey, why don't we do this together? So there's so many things that can come out of this that are so good, guys. And here's my thing. I've declared it publicly. You guys will have it by April 1st. Buyeragencyplaybook.com. It's coming to you, and these ladies are going to be major contributors to it. So I'm excited. This is where I get riled up, as you could tell.
I don't blame you. I mean, one of the things I've been saying on these panels that I've been doing this week is, it's important for us to remember we need to bend so we don't break. right? And so we need to adapt. We need to be able to be flexible, right? At the end of the day. For me, one of the other things, because you guys both of you ladies brought fire when it came to defining value proposition. But what I would add to it is this: your new value proposition is client experience. Clients do not
Yes.
want to have to call 13 agents for 13 houses and wait for those 13 listing agents to call them back to maybe negotiate a showing, right? You're not even negotiating money, you're negotiating a showing, right? And getting
Mhm.
them to make time for that. That's just not a good experience. Whereas you, as the buyer's agent, can provide an extremely valuable customer experience. And your customer experience isn't even just opening doors, right? It is also in the technology that you use. Do you have
Yes.
proprietary or great technology that creates convenience or enhances the experience of that customer? You know, how well do you know your contracts? Can you tell a customer without looking at it what paragraph 9 talks about and why it's important to them, right?
Yes.
Do you know the difference between your options, your obligations, and your opportunities for negotiation and your purchase contracts? I used to highlight. I had 3 different highlighters for my contracts, and pink was for options, green was for opportunities, and, maybe a blue was for obligations. Like, so the contract itself would identify visually for that customer what they were reading and what it meant for them, right? And I
That is
would
how
use
you
it.
stand out from the people pile. That is what we're talking about. You guys, she's hit it spot on. And if you have never read the book, Unreasonable Hospitality, I highly recommend you guys go out there and get it and think, how are you going to make those showing experiences a wow factor if your, buyer broker agreement is only for a month, right? That person has the option to say, you know what, Kathy, it's been great, but you just, I'm not feeling it, right? Because there is an expiration date and we have to assume that the person is not going to buy the first home that they see, right? So now you have the real work starts after you've signed that agreement. So how are you going to stand out, right? Of course, you may have an arsenal of knowledge and, the contracts, and the person is, is excited to work with you. Now, once they start working with you, how are you going to make sure that they stay working with you even upon expiration of that buyer broker agreement? Because if they haven't found a home within that negotiated time or that agreed upon time, they have choices to move on as well. So I want you guys to think about the initial buyer broker agreement commitment, the experience while you are showing homes, and how you are going to give a wow experience. And that book is called Unreasonable Hospitality. And then after that, the post experience is crucial.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And for the question regarding it was for the pink, blue, and green highlighters, it was options, opportunities, and obligations, right? So that that was what it was for the contract.
Kendall, we may have to have you put that in the buyer agency playbook.
Absolutely, Queen. Whatever you need, I got you.
Listen, we're
Kathy,
doing
what
this
about you?
because we want to give back. So Kathy, take us home with the value prop.
Well, something that was really big news today that I want to announce to everybody before everybody leaves is that the president of the Mortgage Bankers Association came out and said he sees opportunity in the dual license model for agents to be licensed as a mortgage loan officer and a real estate agent. And that's something that is near and dear to me because my husband Steve with New American Funding and I have been building a model for just this, for real estate agents to get their mortgage license and be able to participate in the mortgage money. So you'll get to make a little bit extra money, add that to your commissions without doing all of the loan processing. So don't be scared that we're talking about throwing you into the fire of that side. But it's really, really something that's catching fire. We've already got 100 and something agents just in the last month signed up for this. And it's a way to increase your value proposition to your buyer. It's going to make you a better agent. It's going to give you more understanding of the loan side. And the best part of it, besides getting a little bit of extra compensation, is it removes that curtain between what's happening on the financing side and what's happening with your contract. So you are now able to have complete transparency and it's completely compliant. You're able to know exactly what your buyer can afford, what their credit score is, if you're wasting your time, not wasting your time. And in the process, you get paid on the loan as well. So it's an incredible model. Steve and I it's our baby. We've been birthing this for over a couple of years.
Yeah,
And
over 2 years now.
and now that the president of the mortgage Bankers Association has put his thumbs up on it. This just came out today. You're going to see people racing for this model. So, and ours also has a downline attached to it. You don't have to be at any particular brokerage. You can be anywhere and use this model. And it's really incredible. It's groundbreaking. So reach out if you want more information on that as well.
I think we're going to see a lot of groundbreaking changes as a result of all of this. I think that we're going to see some changes in financing. I think we're going to see some changes across the board. Guys, we are going to lock arms. We did this because we wanted to come together for the industry, and we will continue to follow this. As you can tell, the ladies here today, not only are they smart, powerful, knowledgeable, they are experts in their field. This is the quietest I've ever been because I just love listening to them and taking it all in and just being able to just have this type of wisdom in my corner makes me sleep better at night. And I wanted you guys to be a part of this fireside chat because we were having it off the record and we said, let's go out there and do this together so we can help our industry. Kendall, I want to thank you. You are a fan favorite, my friend. You are just leading the way. Kathy, you are a pioneer in our industry. You are such a leader of not only the real estate space, but the mortgage space and the brokerage space. And I know what you have done to help push this industry forward for the last 25 years. So thank you. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, to sit at the table with you all. And if you guys have any questions, please follow these ladies, follow us, hit us up on IG, whatever is our preferred method of, you saw our handles there. This is just the beginning. You will hear more from us on lawsuits and leadership. Stay tuned. And please, if you found value in this video, share it. Share it with others. The replay will be available. Kendall, how can they get the replay?
Yes, great question. It should, hopefully you will have access to it. You know what? If you go to my YouTube channel, it will be there because we've also streamed this live on YouTube. So that's the easiest place. But it will still live here on Facebook, on all of our pages. We've all shared it. It will continue to loop there. So you'll be able to rewatch it there. And I believe that if you registered, it'll also send you a copy as well.
And I'm feeling really inspired right now because I usually do this. I always have this kind of inspired action. I am probably going to believe that there will be a lawsuit and leadership Facebook group community that we are going to launch as of immediately because of the amount of requests that we are getting. And we are going to follow this. We're going to grow with you. It is brand agnostic. I don't care which broker you're with. I don't care what level of expertise you are at. If you run a team, if you are a solo agent, if you are a broker, we are all former broker owners as well. So we have the knowledge to help you. And we're going to bring resources together so we can get through this together. Thank you guys for being here today. Kendall, Kathy, you guys are amazing.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you. Thank you, Vero. Love you, Queen.
Yes. Thank you all for coming.